Well, if there's one thing I've been hearing a lot of lately, it's people talking about the Ides of March, and everybody's saying, beware of the Ides of March. And it seems to be a big topic this year. And I thought, what is actually happening on the Ides of March, which is basically the 15th of March? And there is some historical background to the Ides of March. I mean, that's when Caesar was assassinated. So what we're talking about with the Ides of March, there is actually something happening on that day, and that's when Mercury goes retrograde. I will get into that in a minute. But the reason why I even mention this is because there's a lot of people who are trying to um, capitalize on fear. And I don't normally want to talk about this because I don't want to call anybody out for, doing what they do. That's just part of life. But ultimately, this is a time to be discerning and really to tap into your own intuition and to decide what is right for you and what isn't. There are going to be people who will take this energy, and maybe they do feel the energy is shifting, and maybe they do feel the fear around them. They're going to make it into something that is sensational, and it can really sort of tilt people. So, bottom line for the whole of March, especially, and going into the future, just being aware and just being open and understanding that if somebody's saying something, it isn't necessarily true. Anybody who's psychic, and we all are psychic or we have intuition, all of us do. It's literally anybody who's like a good psychic will tell you that you're not always going to get it right. And I always liken it to dipping your hands into the ocean of consciousness, super consciousness, and you get a few drops that are stuck to your fingers, and that's literally all you have. That's what the intuition will give you. And how you read those drops is really up to you. If you live in an atmosphere of you're scared that things are going to come for you, then that is what you're going to project. If you live in an atmosphere or you live in the kind of ideology of the world is an abundant place and there's a lot of hope still in the world, those types of things, well, that's the kind of message you're going to bring. And so that's important to keep in mind. And that no matter what we see in the transits or what's happening every year or every day or every month, the bottom line is this. Humans are resilient and we get through whatever is in our path. That's just part of life. We always keep trucking along. And also, I would say that in every transit report that I look at, every eclipse, every new moon or full moon or whatever I'm talking about, there's always going to be some little glimmer of light that kind of gives us that strength and resilience to push through whatever energy we meet in our collective. Then that is sometimes what we can hook ourselves to as we traverse the world. And keep that in mind. There's always good. There's nothing like just darkness. And if you look at darkness as a metaphor, you see that if you have a super black stadium, like the blackest stadium in the whole world, and it's huge, and somebody comes in with just a little candle, it is amazing how much light that can bring into that space. And so that is where we can put our focus on the light. And the one thing that I will say, especially with Pluto, it brings this concept of if we're always tapped into the world and what's happening with the world, and this is breaking down, and this is a problem, and this is really terrible, and all these types of things. And for the most part, I would say that anybody listening to this video has very little ability to control the big things that are happening in the world. You can't control the things that are happening or the power that is being used in whatever way it's being used. You can't control much. But what you can control, and this is what Pluto's actually telling us, is that you can control things in your own little environment. And so what it's saying is that maybe you can't solve world hunger, but what can you do? Can you volunteer at a food bank or something like that? This is where we're basically saying we can't solve the problems of the world, but in our own small way, we can make a difference. That is the theme for this month and going forward, really, with Pluto going into gate 41, line 2, because Pluto will only go to gate 41, line 2, and then it will start to retrograde. So it's really bringing a big message for us all. You can't solve the world's problems, but what can you do? And that is the question that we can all ask ourselves as we move forward. Instead of being left in a position where you feel powerless and that you have no control and you don't know what you're going to do, then this instead is saying, what can you do? Then this is especially true because right in the beginning of the month, on March 1st, we have Venus going retrograde in gate 21. And it is going to retrograde until April 12th. And so basically, the one thing that you could look at with Venus, it is the softness. It is about, having conversations, trying to figure out what each person wants. Again, diplomacy. And so when Venus is retrograde, Venus is acting differently. And this is what could happen in that instead of withdrawing and saying, okay, let's just keep the peace or those types of things, this is where Venus is going to potentially say, no, I want what I want, and unless I get it, I'm not going to let go. So there's that. And so with the Ides of March that I just mentioned, we also have Mercury going retrograde. And because of the proximity of Venus and Mercury, they're going to be retrograding in the same gates. Now, neither of them spent a lot of time in gate 21, so that's not really going to be an overarching energy for for these retrogrades, but they will be retrograding in the gates 17, 25, and 36. Once again, 36 comes into the play and also gate 25. Now 17 is another one. 17 is one that we haven't seen a lot for 2025, but it is going to be part of the eclipse that's coming up in the end of the month. So that is something to keep in mind. Ultimately, with Mercury going retrograde, it's a standard thing where it could be about misinformation or missed calls or missed something. Communication isn't going the way it's supposed to. Buying electronics may not be great because it may not work the way you want to. And with Venus retrograde, it's not the time to really go and get that really crazy hairdo that you thought you should wanted, or the tattoo that looks really good, or that really fancy car that you're just going to go out and splurge and it's like, lemon yellow or something, because you might regret it afterwards. But when we look from the perspective of human design, we look at the gates 17, 25, and 36. Well, we know that 17 is all about opinions. And so this is about opinions being very strong potentially. Now, if Venus is normally not going to kind of fight you on your opinions, or maybe Venus's opinions are a little bit more softballish, that's not going to be potentially the case going forward with Venus retrograde because it's acting different than it normally would. With Mercury in gate 17, this means that potentially we could have a lot of opinions that are not based in any truth, and yet they're going around as though they're truthful. And this is where it's really a wonderful time to check all the things that people are saying, because there are people who actually put things up. They'll put a post up and they'll say, this is the truth. And they may have not done their own homework, and they may believe that it is the truth. And then it kind of goes viral and everybody believes that something is true even though it isn't. And then eventually somebody says, well, this isn't true, it's called out. But bottom line is most people don't get the second wave. They only get the first wave of the not truth. And this is how we get a lot of things that are not true being considered to be true. And that's one of those things to watch for these retrogrades. And if we look at gate 25, we know that both Mercury and Venus are going to connect with Neptune, because Neptune's in gate 25 for the whole of 2025 and going forward into 2026. And this is basically talking about the state of humanity. This is talking about universal love, but it is also talking about potential shocks that we might see in the collective, because gate 25 is half of the 2551 channel. Now, we don't have the 51. Chiron will be moving out of gate 51 on the 4th of March, and so we won't have that full channel. And so it may be a little bit more quiet from the gate 25 perspective. And this is also really connecting with the idea of getting into your body consciousness, letting the instincts of your body or your body tell you where you need to go and what things are true and what things aren't. And so this is another way to use your intuition. And the last one is the one that we've all been feeling, I would say considerably, gate 36. And when you look at gate 36 being an overarching theme for much of 2025, it really does talk about chaos and crisis. But then if we look at the gate 36 as being half of the 35-36 channel, and this is all about progress. This is about passion. This is about excitement. This is about drive and wanting things to work out a certain way. This is about huge, huge, huge expectations. And whether or not those expectations come to fruition is another story. And so this is what we're feeling. A lot of people are having these huge expectations. And let's be clear, the expectations don't always have to be for positive things. They could be for things, negative things that you don't want to happen. And so standing in the center of balance and saying, this may happen or it may not, because we really don't know. Experiential energy or abstract energy or gate 36 big players in the universe for 2025 are basically saying you don't know what you're going to get. You might think you're going to get something, but it doesn't mean you will, especially with Mars in gate 53, right from the beginning of the month, right until the 21st of the month. So this is all abstract energy. And then we add in that Chiron's going to be moving into gate 42 on the 4th of March, and boom, we have this big cycle beginning. Now, I would say that looking from March 4th to March 21st, this is when we're going to see a cycle of some sort. Now, this could be in your life or this could be on the world stage. And what I look at it is a type of cycle that begins with a ton of expectation. And I'm going to get this and I'm going to get that and I'm going to get all this other stuff because this is what I'm going to get from this cycle. Gate 42 is bringing the whole circle together. And so what begins on the 4th or right up until the 21st, it's something like a boulder that you put on the top of the mountain and it just starts rolling and it continues to roll and there is momentum and it continues to move forward. But what doesn't happen is potentially getting what you actually want it to be. And that's the biggest key. All the starts or the beginning of the cycles that you may want to put into play are absolutely fine to do, but they're well thought of things. And I talk about this as being the most precious seed that you have. And you want to plant it in the best location with the best chance of being something good. You never really know what that seed's going to bring. You don't. And I would say the seed that Mars is bringing is a seed that we don't even know what it is, only that it's a seed and you're going to try and take care of it as much as you can and see what comes out of it. And I think that if you're open to what shows up, then you're going to be okay because you don't really have an expectation. Expectations are the bubble that eventually bursts. And this is what happens. And when it bursts, then everybody goes, wow, how come that didn't happen the way we thought it was? Well, that's because we live in a world that is not as predictable as we'd like it to be. And this is where we're at right now. We're in a very unpredictable world where things are shifting and changing at all points. But that is basically the story of life. What we've created with the cross of planning, with the gate 9 and 16, is this concept that we are in this patterned world. And yes, we do have a lot of structures. Everything is not indestructible. We are in a patterned world, but in real life, the patterns are not going to be able to be repeated all the time because we know that you can drive down a road 100 times, but there might be one time that somebody else is driving down the road and something happens. Maybe they bump your car or something like that. So because you've driven down that road 100 times, the expectation is you're going to drive down the road and everything's going to be exactly the same. And then one day it happens, and then you have to, pay a few dollars to get your car fixed or something like that. But ultimately, this is what abstract or experiential energy is about. This is where we can really step into it and say, okay, this is the world that we live in. This is the expression of life. And there's nothing really to do other than to be. And I know that sounds a little cheesy sometimes because, everybody says, well, what does that even mean? Well, it does mean that that's all we can do. You can lay all the plans out. You can do all the best things you want and have the best of everything. But does it mean that it will turn out the way you want it to? I've been watching this for a while and I'll wait for it to happen or it won't. But my prediction is that this AI thing that everybody's putting their money and energy into, it's not going to turn out the way people think it's going to turn out. I think there's an AI bubble that's going to come, like the dot-com bubble, and that's going to happen. And I'm going to put that out there. And if it doesn't happen, that's great because I know a lot of people have invested in it and I don't want, people to lose money, obviously. But I see it as an expectation, and this is what we're riding on that fumes of expectation. And so just taking a step back and looking at life as, yes, unpredictable, and really holding your dreams, your goals, all those types of things, and what you think is going to happen, hold it loosely and let what really is going to happen show up because that's the nature of life. We never really know what we're going to get until we meet that moment in our lives when it shows up for us. And that always can be something beautiful that we've always wanted. So always keep that in mind. The eclipses look a little intense for the month as well. And so, as I said in the beginning, it's about seeing what you can do and letting go of the rest. And I will have full videos on that as the month goes on. And if we didn't have enough of Gate 36 in the world, well, we're going to get a little bit more on March 17th, and that's when Saturn moves into Gate 36. And this is going to bring in the whole Saturnian kind of style, which is governments, older people, the disenfranchised, people who are struggling in life, people who don't have a lot. Those are going to be the things that we're going to have on the world stage showing up. And it's going to be potentially stuff about expectations not being realized or things that they thought were going to be, or looking for progress of some kind and not really receiving it potentially. But we'll see how that plays out. But that's going to be another added energy. In April, when Saturn moves into gate 36, line 6, that feels like it's going to be a very pivotal time for planet Earth where we actually start to realize the things that have happened and the things that have been put in motion. And it should be sort of an eye-awakening moment. So, the end of April, early May, Saturn goes into gate 36, line 6. And this is called, and we're going to have a lot of the gate 36, line 6. And so, this means that it's going to be a theme that we're going to get a little bit of a hint of what's happening in April, early May, and then later on it'll come back in September and right into 2026. But this is basically saying a profound sorrow and cynicism that is not diminished by the understanding that darkness is self-annihilating, the sorrow of cynicism that comes with seeing that despite the correctness of the feelings, there's always crisis. What this really talks about is, and it does sound very nefarious, but what it really does talk about is this concept that people make a lot of decisions with big expectations and they're in the dark about what it's going to bring. Or alternatively, they don't think about outcomes. They don't care about outcomes. They don't care about consequences. It's not really talking about people who have gone into situations where they kind of took their time and decided, okay, well, this is what I want to do. This is a situation where people would jump in and mess things up a lot, and they think that, okay, this is going to be the best thing in the whole world. Everybody's going to be so excited about this. And this is where you're really going into the dark and you're just doing a bunch of stuff and you're thinking, oh, this is going to be what it's going to be. It's going to be great stuff. And ultimately, it may not be what you think it is. And especially with, like I said, gate 53, with Mars spending extra time in gate 53, line 3, where it is in detriment. This really does show up, and I say more of a global perspective where people are just jumping in, doing a bunch of stuff, saying it's going to be wonderful, it's going to be so good, and the truth will be revealed as we get into later dates, especially when I believe Saturn gets into gate 36, but even more so potentially end of April into early May. So a little bit of a diversion, a little bit far into the future. It's just part of the process that we're going through for 2025. And to add to that perspective of people driving up the intensity of, oh, something is going to come kind of thing, we also have the Earth going into, it's going to be transiting through all the awareness slash fear gates of the spleen. And this is going to be happening from March 24th right up until May 2nd. And so this is going to bring that extra emphasis of potentially fears that people feel. But always we know that in every fear we have awareness that can be found. And if you haven't looked at my video on the power of fear, you can check that out. It gives a little bit more information about how fear can be sort of looked at and how it can be worked with. And I also have videos on all the awareness gates or the splenic gates. But ultimately, this is going to change the dynamic a little bit more and sort of, you could say, amp up the energy. But again, being in your own space, being in your own integrity, and you're the one who decides what you believe and what you don't believe. And on March 26th, we have Uranus moving out of gate 23 into gate 8. It is finished with gate 23 and it won't be back again for another 84 years. So it will make sure that it gives us a lesson for the remainder of March as we move through. I think that if you're looking at it from a global perspective, a lot of people would think the future is now instead of being the future being the future. So in other words, believing that everything that's happening, that all those ideas that you have, all those far-reaching ideas are going to happen like right away, like within a month or two. And I think that this has driven this AI concept of, it's going to revolutionize the world. And maybe it will, but will it revolutionize the world in the way everybody expects it does? And that's a big question. And so I think that this has been, it has been an interesting dynamic for the world. And I think that when it moves into gate 8, that will be a huge shift in energy. And anybody who hooks into the gate 8 with a hanging gate 1 or the 1/8 channel or the gate 8 will feel this potentially more impactful. But again, we all can feel the impact of the transits as they move through. We're all unique, and how we connect with things is really up to us. But this brings this concept of moving from the thoughts and ideas of gate 23, the 2343, far-reaching, really profound, innovative ideas. Now we're moving to a direction of our creativity about how can we make these ideas come into being, and this is where we're bringing it. So this is where we're basically looking at uniqueness as something that is a good thing, that is different. And so it could be a time where once again we're looking at people who are different, who don't do it like everybody else does, and saying, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Maybe that's somebody who I want to look at, or maybe that's somebody who has some ideas that I want to sort of follow along with. And that's potentially what we could see with Uranus. Again, it goes back to this idea of Uranus being about far-reaching ideas, also revolutionary ideas, AI, internet, all those types of things. But again, this is looking at the direction of the creativity. And you could say that this is where you're really kind of bringing something into being a little bit more than before. And then finally, when Uranus moves into gate 20 later on in the year, I believe in July, then I think that would be when the rubber hits the road and this concept of what is in the now, what do we actually have in our lives? What do we actually have that has manifest from this far-reaching idea? And we know that these are all slow-moving things because they're mutative. And so the expectations with gate 36 could be off the charts, but the reality, of course, may be very, very different. But ultimately, in closing, I wanted to say that right now is a time of decrease, as we know. Things are being removed so that we could have more growth. It's never easy when you're going into a new cycle because we are in the beginning of a new cycle. Pluto's bring us through a new cycle. Pluto is a transformational energy, but it's also an energy that basically takes everything out and then builds up something brand new. And of course, that's going to take time. But no birth is easy. We know that. And when these big cycle changes happen globally, there's not much we can do except, as I said, move through the energy, flow with the energy as much as we can, be in the moment, enjoy what we can, appreciate the beauty that still remains because it still is out there. Do what you can that makes your life better. And I'll read what I wrote for my post about the month ahead. Everyone has a place in this world, a metaphorical garden to tend, because by doing things that feel good and tending to your life, you can move through turbulent times with grace and resilience. And that is my belief for the month ahead and going forward. And with that said, I hope you have a peaceful month ahead. Until next time, take care and bye for now.